This is a presentation about some of the current events going on in the Republic of Seychelles. This first article I found was called New Rules in Seychelles, Improve Transparency, Speed for Overseas Healthcare Cases. Essentially what was going on here, Seychelles health services aren't good enough to care for some of the people, so they have to get overseas care, and a lot of the citizens didn't know what the process was, uh, or what they had to go through to be able to apply for that overseas care, because they can get compensation if they apply a certain way. And especially people getting private sector care, they were wanting a second opinion from overseas care, which tends to be a better option than the care in this country. So some of the problems, there are no qualified specialists available for certain treatments, and over 200 patients are referred to overseas treatment each year. The process hasn't been laid out clearly to the general public, and some citizens are concerned or want second opinions from private sectors or overseas treatment. Some of the key players involved in this, Danny Foire, the president, of course, he had to pass this bill that was making everything more clear. And then Jean-Paul Adam, the health minister, he oversaw everything that went on, probably played a large part in writing the bill itself. And of course, he needs to make sure it's enacted properly. The Cabinet of Ministers and the National Assembly, much like how our Senate and House of Representatives works for bills, how they get passed, they have to go through the Cabinet of Ministers and then the National Assembly and then to the President. The Overseas Diagnosis and Treatment Board, they're a healthcare agency. They're basically they're like a board that controls all of the hospitals. So how we have boards that when in certain regions, they'll have a whole bunch of different hospitals under them, and they have to make sure that the hospitals are being maintained, doing everything properly. That's exactly what that is, except for it's a national board. And then the appeals committee, that's who you would go to apply for an appeal to be able to get the overseas treatment and get compensation for it. Some background on this, of course, over 200 citizens of Seychelles need overseas care per year. The process for applying for it and getting overseas care had not been completely clear or open to the public, and citizens seeing private care in the country were especially concerned about how to go about the process because they wanted second opinions from overseas care practitioners. This is in conjunction with the president pushing for more transparency and good governance. This second article is entitled Appointment of Regional Councils in Seychelles Criticized as Curtailing Democracy. Essentially what was going on here, there were district councils created for each of the districts, and they weren't good enough to look more at a localized level, the small scale things. So they created regional councils, and what happened was the two major parties, whenever these regional councils were made, the council members were chosen instead of being elected. And of course, they're all in favor of these two major parties right now, therefore giving those parties more power. So some of the problems with this, of course, the council members were chosen without a democratic election process, and the citizens would rather wait until there are funds able to have an election, because one of the issues is they haven't had enough funds in the country to run some elections. So these parties are kind of taking advantage of that and just putting the people that they know support them into positions of power instead of having a democratic election. The regional level governance can't solve all the district level issues, so that's why they ended up making these new councils for the smaller scale. And of course, all of this causes distrust of government and the party system, because these two parties are basically trying to put in people that they know they will support their parties, so they're putting them in positions of power, so that way they end up having more power both on a large scale and a local scale. Some of the key players in this, Patrick Pile, who's the former Speaker of the National Assembly of Seychelles and the current leader of the L'Alliance Seychellois party. That party actually broke apart from this other party, the L'Union Democratique Seychellois, due to some of these issues that they've been having. And then there's another party, the Parti Le Peuple, and the L'Union Democratique Seychellois and the Parti Le Peuple are the two major parties that were responsible for basically putting these people into a position of power over the regional districts. Another person to consider is Maxuzi Munden, who's the designated minister of local government. She actually has that as a national position, and basically she was the one that was responsible for looking over the larger scale sections, and they kind of surpassed her a bit to be able to do what they did here. But it was a pact between those two parties, the Linyan Democratic Sisselwa and the Party LePep, to be able to basically make what happened happen. But Maxuzi Munden seems to be trying to support this decision, saying that it will be good for the communities and it will be encourage people to be more proactive. But of course, it looks very shady from a government perspective. Some more background for this issue: the regional level governance was not able to properly accommodate district issues, which was the whole reason that this was brought into fruition. Funding for elections has been low. Related to that, uh, the Pile guy, he actually was quoted in this story that saying the mayor of Victoria was actually chosen, which is their capital city on the island of Mahi. Uh, their mayor was chosen as well, and in fact not elected. So there seems to be many issues with things like this happening in the country. The council members were chosen, of course, because the two major parties chose them. They were all members of those two major parties, and that's where the real issue is even if they were chosen from these two parties, not democratically, the citizens know that these two parties are basically using it as a way to gain more power in the country. And the district administration system was already set up and working decently well. Realistically, they could have carried out operations until there was enough money for an election. This last article here is entitled "Tunnel Planned on Seychelles Main Island Will Reduce Congestion, Increase Productivity," advisor says. Now, this one is a very different subject matter than the other two. Basically, what's going on here is the government of Seychelles is planning a whole bunch of infrastructure projects, and one of them is actually, well, kind of two in the same, but it's this one particular project aids in the making of another project. But what they're planning is on their main island of Mahi, they're trying to build two tunnels under the island to connect the east and west sides of the island. And using the rock from digging these tunnels, they want to build a dam on the island as well, allowing water to be diverted through the tunnels for usage across the island. Some of the problems with this: money used for the project could be used to improve serious issues the country's having right now, like health services and roads, which of course the government doesn't have the funding available for this project in the first place. So if they're going to spend money they don't have, why don't they spend it on issues that people are actually concerned about? Of course, other concerns are the Seychelles is very concerned about being very conservative with their environment. They don't want to cause a lot of impact on their environment, which is very interesting when there hasn't been an environmental impact study done on this project, considering how large scale of a project it is. I mean, this is their largest island in the country, and they have just it's almost like they've refused to do an impact study. Due to not having the funds for the project, it's highly rumored that the tunnel may end up becoming a toll road to be able to pay for the project. And then the project costs are estimated right now at 63.14 million US dollars. Some of the key players in this are Bertrand Bell, who's the economic advisor. Either people working under him or he himself actually came up with this idea and kind of just shoved it into the face of the cabinet ministers and the president. The cabinet ministers are actually one that passed this idea, and Danny Foire, the president, of course, is trying to get people under the idea of doing this because it's just what his government is proposing right now. Some more background on this issue: the government actually plans to contract the project with the private sector, either to receive a loan from the private sector company or to give the private sector partial ownership. Of course, this is the problems with that would be one, you take out a loan, your government now owes a company money. You don't take out a loan, but you give them partial ownership, and instead of your government being able to make money off of making it a toll road, then that private sector company is then making the money off of it and can basically set the fare as whatever they want. Uh, the current plans are to get a single tunnel built in 15 to 36 months. They want to start building in 2019 or digging in 2019. And 15 to 36 months, that does not seem like ample enough time to dig through an entire, I mean, it's through an entire island. Rock taken from the digging is going to be used to start the dam project, but of course there's still a lot of concerns about what the environmental impact will be, and it's not been looked at all. They've completely disregarded that this can actually have a huge impact. Of course, there's even more concerns about if they're drilling and they hit a water reservoir, what's going to happen. Um, the economic advisor, there's a quote from him on this article stating that he said, if we come to water, we're just gonna patch it up, and the water is going to naturally divert around the tunnel. More than likely, that's not what's going to happen. If you dig and you're where pressure's a little bit higher because you're under tons and tons of rock, and you hit a water pocket, that water is going to spew out, and those people are going to drown. And then not only do you have multiple lawsuits from the death of people of a private sector company that you decided to hire because you didn't have enough money to pay for the project itself, but then you have a flooded tunnel that you can't dig through anymore, and the project comes to a halt. So I don't think they've looked into this project as much as they should have at this point. But we'll see what happens. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little session on learning about some of the current events in Seychelles.